Okay, there we go. Yeah, that shit was turning for a minute just now. Just saying going live, going live, going live, going live. You know what's happening. Finally let me through. Let me back through the gates. All right. What's going on? I see got a Kato got an ego. No doubt we all got egos. I'm saying you ain't alone. Ego is a good thing to have. It's a nice friend when you make it your best friend. Saying we too busy making that shit our enemy. Absolute. Yeah, so basically, um, just seen the title, um, knowledge of self doesn't necessarily mean self-awareness. What does this shit even mean? Well, I mean, dealing with having the knowledge of self, we all have to have a certain kind of knowledge of self at the very beginning of our path to have, that's that saying, you don't know where you're going unless you know where you came from, right? Where you going unless you know where you came from. So we all got to have a certain kind of pinch of knowledge of where we came from. I'm saying what we derive from, what people, what civilization, what culture we protrude from. You have to have a certain kind of beginning or know your beginning to a certain degree, which is why you know your parents, you know your grandparents, these people are there. All right. Greetings. Presence as well, Didi. Appreciate it. Um, you acknowledge our parents, we acknowledge our grandparents, we acknowledge our great grandparents. So when somebody says, well, why do I gotta know that knowledge of myself thousands of years, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago? Figure what? You just ask them, well, do you talk to your parents? And they're like, yeah. You say, okay, well, do you talk to your grandparents? If they still, do you still talk to them? You communicate with them? You in touch with them? They're gonna say, yeah. So then, to know your ancestry or the antiquitous bloodline lineage that you come from also holds a certain kind of importance and relevance when it comes to this path to know myself, to know yourself, to have that true gnosis of a beginning in order to embrace ending. I mean, even the damn Bible has that, right? It has a part called Genesis, which is the beginning, and a part called Revelation, which is the ending. So to know your beginnings, to have a knowledge of self, it kind of like an empty color book that begins getting colored with crayons, markers, and color pencils. Because you have to have your coloring book colored in to a certain degree, especially as people of color. We have color, so why not seek some color in your coloring book? It just makes sense. Okay, so yes, having a knowledge of self is relevant according to this path, but self awareness is different twist on things. Knowledge of self, you're seeking external or externalization. You're seeking a lot of external things, people, history, timelines, chronography, dates, events, the way a people were, the way a people are, have been at some time in their existence, in their experience, especially people who share your shade and who are of your genetic lineage. It's okay to know that. It kind of fills in something blank within you. And we all need the blank filled in. We all need every void fulfilled as much as possible. And that's just the principle of desire. That's going to happen with the principle of desire. You're going to want to fulfill your void to a certain degree, which is why we seek clarity, we seek centeredness, we seek balance, we seek contentment. Because we want that void to be fulfilled with something. We want every space within us, especially an empty space, filled with some kind of content And that content to someone who's on this path of enlightenment is a knowledge of their self. Still in all, knowledge of self is not self-awareness. But now we're going to go down exactly what self-awareness is and then what knowledge of self is. Knowledge of self and then self-awareness. So since you graduate from knowledge of self into self-awareness, which is what I teach in my class courses, is a graduatory phase that happens. It's supposed to happen according to this gnosis and this understanding. It's a progressing stage of maturity. You're supposed to go into self-awareness, or knowledge of self is supposed to gradually flower into self-awareness at some time, especially once you have a nice grounded understanding of your gnosis, your ancient gnosis. Okay, so let's go down what knowledge of self is, or what is the effect of it, what it's contained with, and what is the effect of what knowledge of self is. Knowledge of self deals with human behavior to a certain degree. When you get a knowledge of self, you start to behave a certain way. Your Black Power shit, and we the beginning people, we the all people, where everything and anything and nothing and all things all at one time. It gives you a behavior to behave like people. This is where the knowledge of self kind of begins to fan itself into. You start to behave a certain way. You black fist, you with your black people having black discussions. You know what I'm saying? Eating indigenous meals, close to nature. So it will begin to influence a behaviorism. That is the stage of development, though. But some people get stuck in that and stay stuck in that. I'm not saying stuck, but some people get there and they stay there. And there's nothing else a solar desire seeking progress beyond that, or seeking a further view beyond that behavior. And that's just how it is with certain individuals. Knowledge of self also is tied into identity, pride, ego, and personality. Identity, pride, ego, and personality. It gives you a sense of identity, identification. That's what it does. You begin to identify with your people. You begin to identify with people who look like you, like I said, share your shade, of the same lineage. You want to find now if you're part of A.A.A.Y.A, you're part of Dogon tribe, Dogon people, where do they descend from? Where are they over here? What Indian tribe names are they under? What geographical region, where are they at, so I can find them. Since I'm attached to them and they're attached to me and we're connected through one, I need to find them. I need to see them. So knowledge of self plays with the identity, with the pride, and you feel proud about that. But we did what? We conquered what? We're the beginnings of all things. We are the beginnings of all things. Wow. And it gives you a sense of pride. So knowledge of self begins to give you an identity. It gives you a sense of pride. And that alone can begin to imbue and enhance the ego. When the ego begins to imbue and enhance itself through the identity of a knowledge of self, then that begins to transform into a personality, meaning you begin to personalize yourself now. So you are a thing that begins to personalize yourself according to what the ego is whispering in your ear, standing on the pride structured as the identity. So you see, knowledge of self, we all need a knowledge of self, but as you can see, there's a crossroad there where there's possible points of stagnation, or certain brackets and categories that we have to be in at those times in our life for whatever reason, in whatever season. And we need these things certain times to feel to be confined in these little cubicles of certain specific knowledges that we come to research and study and learn about. because now we have to dive deep into it to take everything as much out of it as possible. So these things are needed at certain times within our life on along our path. Just that sometimes these brackets, these cubicles, these categories begin to box us in. And then we don't want to or feel the need to seek anything further than that because we now feel comfortable. Okay, so a knowledge in itself can also mean being, it can sometimes become a selfish thing. Knowledge itself deals with the brain because knowledge is of the brain, the knowing is of the heart. See, so knowledge itself should graduate into self-awareness like knowledge should graduate into knowing. You're only getting knowledge to activate the knowing. You're not getting knowledge to stay in the knowledge because you can have all the knowledge. You can know a lot of shit. But if you ain't applying none, who gives a damn? And this reality is all about application. It's not about what you know. It's about what are you applying? If you're not applying what you know, then what good is what you know? How do you ever get to put it out, display it, and interact with that knowledge with someone or with people in public? Because you want to get that feedback. And once you get that feedback, that's bad. And also self-reflection begins to play in that arena. Because now you get to see what your light does to others who may be in darkness or a certain kind of darkness that you was in at one time. So you share the light. And since they come into you, they kind of mirror you in a certain way. So that light that you share mirrors back upon you and you do internal self-reflection. See, this is a part of the whole thing, the whole intelligence of knowledge of self, the whole purpose of knowledge of self. So knowledge of self also means that you may be so caught up in your knowledge, your books, your study, your research, but still in all, you have a certain kind of attitude, behavior, personality, identity, and ego that you have not yet tweaked. You haven't yet gone in that inwardly state and began to correct certain incorrections within your behavior and your attitudes. And that's actually what's the needed aspect, because that when that happens, that means at that point that knowledge of self has just converted into self-awareness. See, that's where self-awareness comes in. You know, you become aware of how you're speaking, how you're animating to people. You know, you become acknowledgeable. You acknowledge what it is that you may be inwardly, not that is projecting and animated itself outwardly. And if you aren't favoring how you're interacting with people and they're not staying around you because of your attitude or your behavior, that's a lack of inner work. And that's when self-awareness comes. Well, I said knowledge of self is supposed to graduate you into self-awareness. That's how it's supposed to go. That's how it's supposed to flourish. But that's very rare. So individuals, they get knowledge of self and they get this ego. It begins to inflate. So knowledge of self also contains being out of control. Like I said, you haven't worked in your behavior and your attitude. So it doesn't mean that you have good control and discipline. You can lack control and discipline. So knowledge of self doesn't mean control and discipline. Control and discipline comes with self-awareness. Self-awareness is inwardly. Knowledge of self is outwardly. So people play with these words. I'm spiritual. I'm conscious. I'm aware, self-aware, self-realized. I'm self-reflecting. we don't really examine these words that we are speaking. We just say it. We just blurt it out because we think it all means one monad understanding, one thing. No, it doesn't. Just like there's a divine order as the body from infant to adult, it's the same. There's a divine order, an invisible divine order based upon principality. And you have to really be in a nothing state, a state of nothingness, a state of emptiness, purity, innocence, zero. You have to really begin to see what is what and when it is what. And where things go, you begin to reorganize things in the divine order that is already laid out before you. You realize certain things because you've done self-realization. And you see certain things reflecting off of you and back on to you because you've done self-reflection, or you're doing the work of self-reflection. So what you do and how you are is how you see and what you live. Okay, so also knowledge of self deals with the spirit. Once I said before in classes, the spirit is the follower, the soul is the rebellious one. The spirit follows. This is why people who have a knowledge of self, they begin following groups, communities, societies, people. Once again, like I said, knowledge of self, I always say on videos, is not based on something good, something bad, something wrong, something right, something pure, something evil. It's not based on any of that. That ain't got shit to do with nothing. This is all about understanding what is what and where I'm at when I'm in that space. So I'm giving you tools and ways and lenses to identify what you are when you are it in those moments. And you don't judge yourself. You just say, okay, I guess I'm here right now, but I want to be there. How do I get there? Well, first you have to understand the difference between the two, or the difference between the three or the four or five. You got to understand the differences. And that's how you know where you're at in your path, in your journey, at the time that you are there, in these spaces, within yourself, within your experience. See, so it's not about like getting clarity. It's just about really understanding what is blocking you from getting these lights, these glimpses, these spectrums of clarity. Just like the health aspect, it's not about eating healthy and being healthy and doing all this. No, it's about what the hell is clogging up your intestines. What's clogging you up? What's blocking you up mentally, energy-wise, substance-wise, food-wise? Once you clear the blocking, the clarity arrives. That's the point. Clear the blocking, the clarity arrives. It's not about seeking clarity. You can't get healthy. There's no such thing as getting healthy. You are already healthy, though. The real question is, what the hell am I doing to distract and interfere and interrupt my health? The body, this reality, that operates in spite. So, like I said, it's not about getting healthy because you already are healthy. The question is, what am I doing to develop my health? It's the same thing with clarity. Or I want to seek clarity. I want to seek light. You can't seek light to that degree of understanding. You are light and you are receiving it. The question is, what is blocking it? See, so if knowledge of self graduates into self-awareness, self-awareness is already on its way to you. But what's blocking it? The knowledge of self. The brain is supposed to graduate into the heart. That's why the picture on the video was the brain and the heart, because the brain is the knowledge of self. The heart is the self-awareness, because that's where the heart, compassion, forgiveness, sympathy, understanding, embrace, infuse, become. neutralization. That's what self-awareness is. Self-awareness is the more compassionate one. Knowledge is just greed. It just wants, it's feeding itself. The brain is feeding itself. It wants more knowledge, more knowledge. Where those people come from, where they come from. But there's a middle balance too as well. You can have self-awareness and still attain more knowledge. Only if your foundation is on self-awareness, you can play with many structures of knowledge here, knowledge in this bracket, knowledge here, knowledge there. Just as long as your foundation is self-awareness, because you can always come back into the foundation. There is no structure without a foundation. So make sure your foundation is based on your heart grid, not on the graphing zone of the brain. Okay, so somebody who has knowledge of self as well seeks satisfaction. You're seeking to be satisfied when you have a self. I need more shit. I want to know more about that. You're seeking to be satisfied, but satisfied is a fleeting moment. Satisfaction is a human fleeting thing. It doesn't stay, which is why you can have sex, you be intimate with your mate, and you just can't get enough of her. You can't get enough of him. Why? Because they're not in the body. You're connecting with the spirit. You're connecting with the soul. Why? Intimacy is where the soul and the spirit get to play in the physical reality. So of course you can't get enough of each other. You're not meant to get enough of each other. There is no limit of each other. So how can you get enough when there is no limit to your nature? So that's the game. That's the trickery the physical reality plays on you. I want more, but you have a stopping point. Energy is chaos, but you are the orderly one. You're the one that can put an order to chaos. You become satisfied or content with what you have, and whatever else arrives in that containment of contentment, you're okay with. And it gets a little more simpler as we go along. Knowledge of self also promotes morality. You know, to be moral, look this way, act this way, behave this way. Goes back to that behavior again. I know my black power now, I know my black people and this and that, and we got to do this and we got to do that, and that got to happen, and this got to happen. We don't do that. Let's do this how we do things. How do you know? We're all people, we're all things. We're the worst and we're the best of this polarity. We're the highest and we're the lowest of this polarity. We're all things on this polarity. There's no set based in one set behavior that one people should act. See, so knowledge of self, when you get a knowledge of yourself, that will automatically grow into a certain kind of identity and a certain kind of behavior to mask and costume that identity. Man. Okay, so also knowledge of self begins to teach others, a lot. It teaches others. Self-awareness shares light. Knowledge of self teaches others. It seeks to teach others. Self-awareness just shares its light. It's a big difference between the two. So knowledge of self deals with that aspect. Now, self-awareness. What is self-awareness? Difference between knowledge of self and self-awareness. Self-awareness is the soul's work. This is when you begin dealing with the work of the soul. This is self-awareness, dealing with the work of the soul. Self-awareness deals with confidence. Spiritual confidence, spiritual courage, but in a solar reflection of the soul's nature, not necessarily of the spirit's nature. It's like spirit plus. Knowledge of self is like spirit minus. Self-awareness is spirit plus. It's closer to the soul's intelligence, the soul's aspect. This is when you have your confidence, when you're building your confidence. Self-awareness is also selflessness, to become selfless. Knowledge of self is selfish. Self-awareness is selfless. Self-awareness of the heart. You become selfless, the compassionate one. Self-awareness is beginning to work on your inner imbalances. Self-awareness stops you. It pauses you in your tracks. And it makes you see how you are animating on the external, or what you're dealing with and battling with mentally and emotionally, internally. And you stop and you begin to address and confront these inner wars and mental battles that you're having within yourself, because you know you can enhance yourself to a higher vibration, to a higher degree. You see, and continue walking your path according to your divine purpose, aligned and in sync and with the forces that are. You're not out of alignment. You're not disaligned. You're not offline. You're online. So this is what self-awareness. Self-awareness is also control and discipline. When you have self-awareness, you have control and discipline, or you have more control and self-discipline than others, the majority of people. And sometimes other people can see that as a certain kind of threat, where they won't feel comfortable around you because they feel like, oh, you think you know everything, you're okay. So I've experienced this in many degrees, especially dealing with relationships. Um, Certain people won't feel as comfortable around you because you may uh, possess something that they don't naturally have a full grasp on. And since you're not, and if they're not there at that peak, and you're not feeding their ego, it becomes an issue. They have a knowledge of self, but they don't have self-awareness. Like I said, knowledge of self is a lot of external. Reading, research, studying, dressing it up, putting the mask on, acting the part, acting the role. But self-awareness is actually taking the mask off, taking the costume off, ripping the script up, but not taking the role and moving empty. Because you want to empty out the impurities. You want to address the idiosyncrasies within you, the personalities, identities, the egos that you have created, or the same ego that you created, the avatars that you created in the past. You want to begin facing those, addressing those, conversing with those, finding out, why are you this way? Why do you think this way? Why are you behaving this way? Do you like the way you're behaving? Does it keep people who are seeking light around you? Or does it run them away from you? These things matter when it comes to this understanding, especially dealing with the whole point of self-awareness. Self-awareness also accepts divine truth. It accepts the divine truth of all things that are. It is operating and functioning in its nature, in its primal nature. This is the whole emptying out, being at the zero, being nothing. The nirvana of bliss, the nirvana of grace. This is where you find your grace. You find your grace in your empty space. Your empty space is self-awareness. Okay, self-awareness basically is the grace riding the void. Doesn't get drowned or anchored down in the void. It rides the void. Self-awareness is when you begin channeling and receiving. Because now you are emptying out your garbage. All the stuff that you have accumulated, especially within the first and third chakra, you're accumulating a lot of crap or a lot of programs, and you have been indoctrinated, institutionalized, and you're cleaning yourself from that. You're not necessarily letting things go like that. you're neutralizing these states which may have been extreme. You may have been too far to the left or too far to the right, too far to the left here and too far to the right there. And you're bringing everything back to the middle. All the extremes that are all out, you bring them to the middle. All the extremes, you're bringing them back to the middle. And you're having a middle ground, right, understanding and acceptance and embrace of all things. This is what self-awareness does, which is knowledge of self all the way over here. You know what I'm saying? Them, fuck that. We ain't doing that. Well, we over here. We just people. This is how we get busy. No, don't do that over there. We don't do that over there. Fuck that. Put that in. And it's like, these are extremes that knowledge of self encourages. There's nothing wrong or right to it. It just is what it is in those moments. But just people just stay out on the edges and the outer surfaces and the outskirts of these extremes and never find that middle balance and contest something within themselves to activate that self-awareness, because they're going off too far to the right or too far off to the left. See, so self-awareness is that middle. Knowledge of self is all the way over here or all the way over here. But we play the sides to get back to the middle. And just for the very fact that there are sides means that there's a middle intelligence which exists anyway. Self-awareness is acknowledgement of that which was always there. That's another way of understanding what self-awareness is. To acknowledge that which always been there since day zero. To reach yours, not zero. To become your empty. Zero. To activate your nothing or your nothingness. That is self-awareness. You have to be at a really 0 point state because you've accumulated so many different personalities and identities. Now it's time to go back in them, in there, in that place that produced all these personalities and identities. See, you're going back to the factory, to the warehouse where all this shit was produced from. So you're no longer paying attention to these avatars that were created. You're going to the factory in the warehouse where all this shit is being produced and created from. That's self-awareness. That's your zero state of being, your median point. But we get too far caught into these personalities and identities, and the more we play in them, the more it shocks the central nervous system and it activates feeling. Electric shocks are feeling. This is what keeps us striking out at people and fighting and arguing in relationships, marriages. We lack self-control and discipline when we only have a knowledge of self and do not begin to self-apply our own self-awareness internally. People get lost in their knowledge of self. They feel proud, like I said, because it gives you a sense of pride, and that's okay. You need that. Like I said, we all need to be colored in. Our coloring books, all our coloring books need to be colored in, especially people of color. We need our coloring books colored in to a certain degree. But when are we going to ask what company published this coloring book? Where did this coloring book come from? In order for something to be, or another way of looking at it, in order for something to be colored in, it had to be a blank state prior to, correct? It had to be blank before. So if that which was blank was prior to that which became colored in, when do we redirect our attention to that blank state? To reset that clean slate within us. I have two courses besides my middle classing course. My middle classing course is A.A.A.Y.A. But I have two side courses. One is called NESI or NSI, which deals with the mind. The subtitle was Elementation equals Incantation, showing you how to do things mentally from the seat of your couch and to affect things in Illinois and Nebraska, just from the seat of your car. How to begin to manipulate elements. Elementation equals incantation. That's the course of NESI. The other course I have is called Sekra. Sekra is where the word chakra comes from, or chakra. The course comes from the word Sekra. And that deals with going inside of each one of your chakras, if you want to say, since we are familiar with that. But going deep and addressing and confronting exactly what it is that I'm talking about right now, dealing with the whole self-awareness, accepting your unraveling or your unrolling of your scroll, the story that you agreed to take on, the contract that you signed when before you came out of that womb. Matter of fact, it was even in your mother. There's a spiritual consciousness that decided to take on the role of you. It knew what was going to be named. It knew who people was going to meet. All this stuff, it already knew. It knew I was going to hold this live today. All this shit was already done. This is why I say, whatever it is, your story that's in your melanin, your DNA, your genetics, it's already mapped out. It's cosmic purpose, on purpose. It's already mapped out. You are just a hologram catching up to your projection. This is why when you send a thought out and intent, you say, I want to be this way. I want to be that way. I want to have this. I want to attain that. I want to possess that. I desire that. And then you reach that and you attain it and you get it. That's symbolic of you saying it and calling it forth to you. You are the hologram, and whatever you want is already there playing. It's already there. It already exists. So you're the hologram catching up to your projection. And when you grab it and you possess it, what you desire, and you grab it and you get it, and it's yours now. The question is, at the time that you requested that to come to you, you was in that moment, right? When you got it in your hand, was that the future that you got it? Or is that the moment that you got it? So if you're requesting something in this moment and you get it tomorrow and you grab it and it's in your hands tomorrow morning, tomorrow noon, tomorrow night, wherever, and it's in your hands, and if you stay in that moment right now, it's the same moment that was there today. These moments don't differ. You request something in the moment, you receive it in the moment. This is how you know time is a funny thing. It doesn't really exist. And this is why you get to go inward and begin to self-reflect, to imbue that self-awareness, because you're going in these time zones, these time capsules in your chakras. These black melanin senses, that's what they really are. They're not these colorful things to that degree of understanding, depending upon where your understanding is. They're actually black holes that contain different spectrums of color. And these colors vibrate the mood that you were in and the trauma and effect that you experienced during these times. This is why you have to close your eyes and go into a meditative state or go into a center state to look in at them. Because it is a dark place. Dark doesn't mean bad. Dark doesn't mean negative, evil, none of that. It's just a hidden place, and it's hiding. This is why you behave and you have attitude and you act a certain way, because you don't know where it's coming from. And you haven't yet addressed that inwardly and confronted that and neutralized that. Neutralization comes with understanding, acceptance, these things, having a knowledge of things. This is why that knowledge of self is supposed to get injected into heart and flower as self-awareness. Yes, they're two different things, two different contrasts, but they kind of as well also exist within the same orbit if it's placed correctly within you, by you. Seed, flower, flower, seed. If you know how to place it within you, how to put it, how to organize it and adjust it in its right manner, in its divine order. Okay? Self-awareness is also patience. You master patience. And it's also to master communication. And that's patience. You're taking in and you don't talk as much. You're more silent than you are talking. You're more silent than you are verbal. That's also what self-awareness, that's an effect of self-awareness. That's what happens when one is doing their self-awareness work. That's how that interaction goes with people. Because they're too busy readjusting and reorganizing things in their mind and their heart and their secondary system. They ain't got time to be talking a whole bunch of shit with you verbally. They're doing so much inner work, self-awareness, self-realization, self-reflection. They're doing all this selfness, all this self-work. They don't got time to be reacting back to what you're doing, because they know the importance and relevance and value of that silence, that patience, that grace within them. If you're not supporting that, their attention that they once had on you gets redirected elsewhere, or it stays inwardly. You don't really want a person to see you with their eyes. You want them to see you with their eye. And I always tell people, like I told my students in class, my attendees in class, if you look at the word heart, the synonym for the word heart, another word for the word heart, you're going to see the word I, E-E. So when you close these eyes, this eye opens. That's the whole game. When you have these eyes open, this eye closes, or it's like halfway slanted. It closes and opens, it closes and opens, closes halfway and closes. When you close this, this opens. So this is why people do a lot of inner work. You see people doing inner work in their fashion. They have their eyes closed. They're in a dark space or a dark room or dim light. This is all symbolic of the inner work. Mental symbology, psychological symbology. Because you're going into the deepest aspect within yourself, within your mind, which is the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is the darkest aspect. The conscious mind is the light, the one who holds the lamp through the dark tunnel. So you're penetrating all the time that subconscious intelligence. You're making love to it. The conscious mind is known as the phallus, the erect phallus. The subconscious mind is known as the deep dark womb, or the deep dark yoni. And you begin penetrating it. The love being made produces an offspring called enlightenment. That's how this works. And that only begins to happen when you begin to apply inwardly self-awareness. I used to have a bad temper and things of that nature and get pissed off and shit here and there. But as I did more inner work, self-awareness, self-realization, self-reflection, I got lost inside, but I got found inside at the same time I got lost. And you know what I got found by? I got found by me. You want to get lost within you and then found by you. So I'm no longer on the surface anymore. Like I tell people all the time, I haven't seen a human being for over 14 years. I don't even know what a human being looks like that anymore. All I see is atoms, molecules, compounds, energy, and forces and things of that nature. When you become transparent, others show themselves as transparency. They can't help it. They don't come, you know, but they don't know. I don't see people. I see through people. That's the difference. This is why you're able to see certain blockages within individuals, not just because they're also transparent as well, but because that you're transparent. And those blockages that they have in them, you once had within you. So you can identify that in others' behaviors, their attitudes, the way they speak, the way they animate themselves with you, the way they interact with you. You can see that clear as day because you once acted like that or once was in that state. Not saying that they're worse or inferior to you or bad or worse off. No, that's just where they're in that time in their state, because I was a certain way at one time as well. That could have went real far left or real far right, and it went to these extremes at times. But my path, my mission, my purpose is different. Obviously, I'm here today talking to y'all. See, and being that you are receiving this just as I received it at one time, and we're all still receiving, because I don't teach students, I teach teachers. I don't talk to people, I talk to spirits, I communicate with the soul. That's what my language is. I don't speak English, I speak soul. I speak spirit. It just costumes itself as the English language. But I'm talking past your consciousness into your subconscious dwellings. That's where I like to reside within. So when I'm talking to you, I like to find a home within you that I can reside within. That's what it's about, because I don't truly exist on the outside. I exist inside of you. This is why you may feel a certain way, that I'm talking a certain way, or you may think a certain way, because I'm telling you, my spirit and soul is telling you, I live inside of you. Now, let me show you where I live. And wherever you feel me at, or you have a thought, something happens, that's my energy saying, hey, that's where you live. That's where I reside. That's where I'm truly at. And that's how this work is. That's how this goes. Especially dealing with one of self-awareness, who's had a lot of damn time on their hands. I had a lot of time on my hands. A lot of time to myself. A bunch of time. And I still have a whole bunch of time, because I value my time and my privacy and my silence, because I have priorities in order. You have internal priorities and external priorities. And this also deals with the self-awareness aspect. Most people that I've come across do not have their priorities in order. Now, we've all heard that shit since we were younger. You got the older people, you have your priorities in order, young man. Priorities in order, little lady. Make sure you have your priorities in life. Make sure they're in order when you grow up. And be like, all right, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Whatever. I don't know what you're talking about. All right, yeah, I hear you. But when I got to this stage of maturity now I understand the true value and quality of having your priorities in order. It makes life a lot more simple. It makes your experience a lot more easy to navigate through. Once you know what's most important to you, what's most of the highest value, and what's least important, what should be taken care of right away, and what can need to be taken care of. Now, you have two different sections of priorities. You have inner priorities, internal priorities, which is first and foremost, and then you have external priorities. Internal priorities, like for example, my inner priorities is probably dealing with the system and the being, the way of being, clarity, centeredness, emotional balance, psychological balance. I don't need to request health, because just as long as my emotional and psychological body is aligned and balanced, health is just an effect. It's not something to work on. So mental balance, emotional balance, centeredness, balance, centeredness, and clarity. That's my first priority, my inner priorities. Now, my external priorities are different. My external priority, which always be like the business aspect, dealing with certain things, self-sustainment, financial self-sustainment, and it'll show itself in different ways, like a business or this and that and this, because I'm to myself. So I deal with financial self-sustainment. My external priorities are the priorities that should be upholding and strengthening and supporting my internal priorities, which is first and foremost. So we don't know how we want to be because most people that don't know lack self-awareness. So they don't really know how they want their temperament to be. They don't know how to be. So this is why most people that don't know what to be or how to be, or even their true intelligence of beingness, does not have any idea of internal priority. They don't know how they want to be, especially if they're living vicariously through other people and entertainment or family or friends or whatever. They're trying to live like them, walk like them, talk like them, be like them, dress like them, sing like them. Nobody knows how to be what they are because they don't know what they are. So we put on a lot of masking costumes, especially in between the first and third chakra. And the other four, if you want to say, because there's different quantity of chakra of chakra system in each one of us. We all don't have seven. We don't have this. You have what you have, but you have to know yourself, to know thyself, to determine how many points of relevance that you have within your system, within your solar system. So the other four will suffer because you haven't faced the first three. Your heart will go to the wrong things, or the things that, matter of fact, not only right, it'll go to things, but you can't cry about it. You have to learn from it. Even the wrongs are rights, and even the rights are wrongs, depending upon where you're at in your understandings, in your knowledge of self, and not just knowledge of self, but also knowledge of this reality. Do you know where you're at? Do you know do you know how shit goes on here? If you don't, then why are you here? We're all here to know why we're here. Everything does not fall into logic. So self-awareness deals with neutralizing energy. Self-awareness embraces polarity. It doesn't fight polarity. It doesn't pick a side. It doesn't choose a side. That's not what self-awareness. Self-awareness infuses both sides into one understanding to neutralize the energy within. That's what self-awareness does. It grabs two supposedly opposing sides and makes it one team. It's based on one agreement. That's to be very godly or godlike. That's what God is, if you want to put that title and play with that word at the moment. God is wholeness, right? It's all one thing. So why are you still being split down the middle? God, why are you still split? Why are you still picking sides and choosing sides? You're supposed to be infusing sides. Why? Binding sides. That's the whole purpose of being like God, or this God description. You're not supposed to be seeing sides anymore. You're supposed to be seeing the middle thing in the middle that projects both delusional sides. As a matter of fact, the very reason why you're seeing sides is because you reside in the middle, right? If you see something, what you see that's wrong, and you see something that's right, or you see something that's bad and you witness something that's good, then where the hell does that mean that you're at to see these things? That means you're somewhere in the middle, right? That's common sense. So my question to you is, when are you going to begin acknowledging that middle? Because obviously, if there's one side over here and one side over here, that means those sides are an illusion. They're unreal. They're temporary. But what is the permanent? intelligence and not middle that is projecting both of these temporary illusions. Because whatever is projecting these temporary states of existence, that means that has to be a permanent state of existence. And that permanent state of existence is what should be called self-awareness, or what can be known as self-awareness, or realized as self-awareness. Self-awareness is also realizing your mental and emotional confinement. When you realize the emotions that you are being confined within, that you have been confined within for years, the emotional confinement and the mental confinement, the ways of the thoughts that you have trapped yourself within, the emotions that you have trapped yourself within. This is what self-awareness is, because self-awareness is also graduates into self-realization, and self-realization graduates into self-reflection. Once again, this is what I teach throughout the classes and courses. So you have to begin to see these things, because these are the blockages. You are seeing your confinement. Self-awareness is heart exercise, or exercise of the heart. Knowledge of self is exercise of the brain, or brain exercise. It's brain exercise, knowledge of self. Knowledge of self-awareness is exercise of the heart. So you want to begin exercising your heart rather than exercising your brain. Your brain has had enough exercise. So knowledge of self, like I said, deals with history, timeline, chronography, heritage, lineage, culture, and civilization. That's what the knowledge of self deals with. It wants to know the history of something, the timeline, the chronography. It's trying to identify with something. But identification is a funny thing. It can be an entrapping thing, a stagnating thing. If you get lost in that knowledge and entrapped within that identity, you will not graduate into self-awareness. You won't do no inner work, no self-reflection, no self-nothing. You're too busy being selfish. It has to be this way. You have to behave that way. You have to do this. You have to do that. It's very selfish. You can't tell people how to be and how to act and how to behave. That's not self-awareness. Self-awareness is letting things be what it is and finding where you fit in. Because you honor and respect people's hells that they made and heavens that they made. And you let them go through their full cycles of whatever they're here to do and collect and take back with them, or take with them into the next transformation, the next life, or the next point of transcendence. You accept that, you respect that. That's self-awareness. Knowledge of self is trying to make somebody act a certain way and behave a certain way. That's knowledge of self. That's what it does. It begins to interfere and interrupt and distract others. That's the other light of knowledge of self. Not all knowledge of self is like that. It depends, though, upon how much self-awareness, self-realization, how much self-reflection you've done. Or how much reflection homework you've done, how much reflection work you've done. Because the knowledge of self projects the shadow. Self-awareness is the self-reflection, or the reflection of self. Knowledge of self is the shadow of the reflection. It's a shadowed one. But you want to begin to reflect with yourself, with the many selves that you have created. And until you begin doing that, you're not going according to this path and this understanding, which is not my understanding. It's not my path. It's just the path, the understanding. of how this goes when it comes to the mind, when it comes to the heart, when it comes to the brain, when it comes to the human nature, spiritual purpose. Everything that you look back at, thousands to tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands, all they were saying was take back control of your damn mind. This is what all mythologies are about, what all ancient texts, ancient scripts are about. Take control of your mind. They weren't about history. There wasn't historians back then. Like one of the elders and masters I rode the wave with on my path said they weren't writing history. They were too busy living history. See, and that's the funny thing about having a knowledge of self. If you have no self-awareness, no patience, no grace, you're going to begin to fantasize and romanticize with your history. That's where you have there's a great chance of you becoming lost in your histories rather than redirecting your attention on the mysteries. We fantasize and romanticize over our histories. But why do we do that? There has to be some kind of lack or deficit within us, or a sense of inferiority to some degree, to insecurity, to look back and say, wow, that was amazing. Look at what they did. And you're only saying that because you don't believe that you can do that. And what about if I told you that who you're reading about, that person you're reading about in 20,000 BC, guess what? That was you. So when you read something, keep this in mind, Kima. When you read something and you're reading about a person or people, it's not too far-fetched that who you're reading about was actually you in that life at that time. So you think you're reading about somebody or some other people, but you may actually be reading your shit. Read who you. You're saying how amazing he or she or they were, and you're talking about yourself. You're talking about a soul that you took on at one time for whatever reason and purpose. And now you're this, so you're this one now. So glorifying over histories and timelines and chronographies and events and people and situations and so on and so forth, that means you ain't do no inner work to that degree, real deep. You ain't reached that depth, that deep league under that sea within you. Because if you did, you would be so engulfed in that. Everything else is secondary in third and fourth and fifth and sixth place. All because you are on the path to knowing that self. Not necessarily yourself, but the self. And that's a difference too. Knowledge of self depends on what self you're seeking the knowledge of. You have yourself, which is the human body, the human identity, and then you have the self, which is formless and selfless. Self of the essential nature, the essence. Your physical body is the presence. The history is the presence of something and some people at some time. The mystery and the mysteries is the essence of why they did what they did. What happened to them? What happened within them? How did they create that? Why did they think that way? Why did they live that way? How did they do those things and manipulate those energies and those forces in something invisible called air and sky and space? How did they do that? How did that happen? Where did that come from? Those are mysteries. See, and that's where you want to begin diving more deeper into, according to this path and this gnosis, which is the path and the all gnosis, the all-knowing. So you want to be a part of the all-knowing before the all-showing. The all-knowing is the self-awareness. You begin to know the self and how the self functions and operates. So you become the all-knowing before you display the all-showing, which is the action, the act, the behavior. See, that's how this goes, and that's how this grows. The knowledge of self is personalization, and self-awareness is modification. This is why when we begin to get a knowledge of self, we begin to behave a certain way first, like I said before. And we dress the part of the behavior because you're in the process of speaking, acting, and behaving the role of the knowledge. And during that specific role and presentation, a sense of pride begins producing. And that pride empowers the ego and advises it to begin shielding and defending that specific personality and pride. For what reason? To keep itself relevant in the present state of your focus. At this time, the brain is in the process of learning, not of reasoning. A knowledge of self, the brain is in the process of learning. It's not in the process of applying anything that is learning. This is what applies. This is what learns. Knowledge of self, self-awareness. But you don't apply outward. You don't apply outwards. You apply in. That's awareness. You apply inward, and you don't let nothing and no one distract or interfere with that. No matter how emotional or psychological imbalanced they may be, or may be acting or behaving, they can never penetrate that membrane, that cosmic, that divine membrane within you. It's unpenetratable. You can't pierce it. And no amount of anything can damage that, can do anything to it. And people who are egoistical and who have a knowledge of their self but lack control and discipline don't really like when they can't penetrate that shit within you, because especially if they have that ego, yeah, it gives a sense of pride, but it's a sense of pride because the ego's nature is actually an inferior nature. So little do they sense, they may be feeding their ego and their pride and their act and behavior that costumes and mask that pride. But little do they know that pride, which is built from that ego, the nature of that ego is fucking inferior. That's why it builds up the pride and it creates the behavior and it puts on the mask and costume, because it's a scared little inferior thing. And it uses you as the body, mask, and costume to animate itself through, to use you and use you up. Having self-awareness and self-realization, you see that. And when you see that, you no longer be that. Or in understanding, you don't let it use you no more. You now use it when you feel like using it. And you put it back in the closet when you feel like not using it or not wearing it. So that's the whole point. That's the difference. Like the movie Jim Carrey, The Mask, he put the mask on, that shit got stuck to his face. That's symbolic of knowledge of self or knowledge of yourself. Let me make that distinction. Not knowledge of the self, knowledge of yourself, imbuing your ego, enhancing your pride. Not you addressing and confronting the inner attitudes and behaviors which you have accumulated from the first to the third sekira in your system. And like I said, when you don't address these first three, the remaining four get punished and go through hell because they're not turning on and activating for the betterment of your purpose and the betterment of your balance and your alignment. So the last four, suffer because you're not facing the bottom three. That's how this goes. The mind is the one that applies, but it applies inwardly. The self-awareness is present. The mind, when self-awareness is present, the mind begins to apply principles inward to begin altering those behaviors those hidden behaviors and hidden attitudes and all this accumulation within the first and third sekra, against altering those behaviors into it that works at its optimum best for self-contentment and inner peace. One who is of self-awareness loves the inner peace, appreciates it, and has great control and self-discipline. Yes, we're going to act and animalistic and reptilian and mammalian, other reptilian, mammalian, and animal brain at certain times, but we don't let it override us. We play with it. Sometimes we utilize it at certain times if need be for self-defense, things of that nature. Whatever it may be, but we don't let it override us. It doesn't override our consciousness. We pull it back in. But this is a human reality, and human conditions unfold. And bro, just see somebody trying to hurt your family or hurt your children or something like that, and you have to do things to defend your child, to defend your family, or someone you love, or someone you care about. So the human condition is needed at certain times. There's no right or wrong to this operation. It's all about understanding, about nothing else. Understanding. Once you understand something, that understanding turns into hands and legs that begins to navigate you and walk you on that specific path and that specific vibration. Knowledge of self. This is knowledge of self. This is a important point right here too. Knowledge of self most likely likes to play Halloween. And those that play this Halloween game can be the most mind dangerous individuals to be around. Not only are they fooling you as this presented spiritual indigenous garment and this act and behavior, they're also fooling their self. And also, every time they open another book, attend another group, and look into another mirror, they keep seeing this image, this costume, and this mask, and it's fooling them as well, which in a sense is equivalent to an aspect of possible narcissism. They become in love with their image, their smarts, and their intellect, and may become repellent to the enlightened one of divine intelligence when approached. Why? Because their ego, their protector, their image defender is present at those times to uphold its falsehood. See, once again, this is that knowledge of self thing, or knowledge of their self, not knowledge of the self, but knowledge of their self, their genetic lineage, their shade, their color, people, their culture, their civilization, what they are immediately tied to. They start to dress like it, they act like it, speak like it. But the thing that's missing from is the behavior and the attitude of it. So they'll have a new gathering of a knowledge of self and knowledges in different ways about their lineage, their timeline, their histories, so on and so forth. And that may change within them, the brain, but their heart, they did no heart work. Their attitude and behavior is worse or the same as it was before they got a knowledge of self. They done no inner work to that degree. So they can dress like the part, act and behave like it, and these people will draw you to them because you're looking at them saying, damn, they look spiritual. They playing the part. They're totally like it. We got even little things and activities that is indigenous. Maybe they're spiritual. Maybe they're indigenous. Maybe they're tied to. Maybe they have knowledge of things. And if they have a certain kind of look to them, may be attractive or draw you to them, you're going to go to these people. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they did any inner work. Matter of fact, this may be the reason why they dress the way they dress and act the way they act on the surface. So surface, because their inner is actually lacking and starving and suffering because there's no work be done internally. So they mask the internal with the outer mask and costume. And like I said, these can be the most dangerous because they pull on people who are of a high spiritual accordance or maybe of a high principle applying active nature. And we appreciate someone looking indigenous, acting indigenous, doing indigenous activity. And we may just vibrate to that. And these people that vibrate to these people are of a spiritual accordance or spiritual accordance, very much with their soul. But the person just playing the part, dressing the part, acting the part, other things go left and go sour. And this is when that spiritual person and that solar person finds themselves in situations like, what the hell happened? You look like it, you talked like it, you walked like it, you acted like it, but you're not it. So we can get drawn in, and that's what that whole saying, don't judge a book by its cover. See, but you don't necessarily judge a book. You know, we vibrate towards things which are familiar. That's just the nature. We vibrate towards things that we feel are familiar in certain degrees of understanding. Okay. And self-awareness is where you become God. This is where you become God within self-awareness. The God force is the guiding force. The guiding force is the soul. The word soul means sun. And a sun remains in the middle of a cosmic rotation of planetary bodies that orbit its centered light. That light is called, or that gathering around that light is called a solar system. Like what astronomers and astrologists identified as the solar system, that this reality is surrounded and orbited within, around a centered sun. When you become that centered sun, that's a quality or an effect value of self-awareness, self-realization, and self-reflection. This light begins to imbue, you begin to radiate this aura, this hidden aura from the eyes, but seen by the eye of people. Hidden from the eyes of people, but seen by the eye of people. And this is when you begin to create a solar system. Like I said, God is the guide or the guiding force. The guide is the soul. Another word for soul is sun. And a sun is a centered light with things orbiting around it. This is where you get that picture, that painting of the Last Supper, where Christ is in the middle and the 12 disciples are around him. As he's represented as the 13th one, the middle one, the epitome of enlightenment, the enlightened one. Self-awareness is what begins your godhood. When light seekers begin to be drawn to your inner light, to your inner light in orbit, because your demeanor is very inviting, very calm, thus encouraging gravitation towards you. You create this gravitational pull unknowingly, unbeknownst to you. You create this gravitational pull like moths to a flame, like a black hole that vacuums all things inward. And that's how you know you've reached a certain level of attainment of godhood, is when you are that sun in the middle, that solar activation. You gravitate, you create a strong gravitational pull towards you, and people circle and orbit that nucleus of light within you. See, and that's when I began speaking, and I would just find people just start coming and just circling me and surrounding me in my conversations. I could have a conversation with one person. I look around, there's 10 people around. Just like that. I didn't call them. I didn't draw them. I didn't say, come over here, come listen to this. They just appeared as moths drawn to a flame. So it's to turn on that inner flame. But you have to face that fire. And that fire resides in the lower three sekira. You face that fire in the lower three sekira. Blow out that flame. When you blow out that fire and you rise that inner flame. So you blow out that candle to become the blowtorch. That's the whole point. You become that blue light, what they call that, what you call that damn light? Not propane. Just that blue light, that blue fire, that all fires come or light up from. I don't know if it's propane, I'm not too sure what that was called at the moment. But you become that light. You don't necessarily become that orange, red, and yellow glowing on top of, butane. You become the butane fire, the blue light. You put out that fire below, and then you create a whole new fire. That flame, that inner flame that draws the moths to you. See, so, and last but not least, right here's the last part. Self-awareness arrives only when knowledge of self subsides. Self-awareness arrives only when knowledge of self subsides. Knowledge of self starts off as a loud volume in your head that turns you into an action figure. Because now you want to take action. Like I said, behaving, acting. So knowledge of self starts off as a loud volume in your head that turns you into an action figure. But as time passes and as you progress into stages of maturity or the matured nature, that knowledge begins to quiet down. And the mind's silence begins to be the loudest volume of feeling and attainment. As the body ages and gets older, the temperament of the spirit and contentment of the soul reaches the surface of focus, your focus. When this happens, you begin participating in that inner calling and becoming that median point of existence, that neither nor either or center of intelligence that seeks as less distractions, interruptions, and interferences as possible within your experience. Knowledge of self turns into self-awareness when the input turns into reception. You're no longer getting input no more. You're getting informed. You are now just being and receiving. That's what I mean by that statement. So it goes from input to reception. That's how knowledge of self turns into self-awareness, when you just begin receiving and you're no longer seeking input and information. Because you are formless. It's no longer seeking inform because you are formless. So you don't seek information. You don't seek to be in a formation because you are in the formless one now, the self-aware one. turns in from input into reception. This is when the voluntary turns into the lax. When voluntary turns into lax. This is why people who activate and contain that self-awareness are way more relaxed in any and every situation, no matter how devastating, serious, severe, or important that situation, same situation, may seem to others, and can handle it very well and balance without becoming emotional about it. I've noticed my vibrational state change from who I was before and what I am now. So I transform from the who into the what. And not saying that because I'm the what now, that I no longer play in my who's. I can play in my who's at any time I'm given. But my lax state of being, internal relaxation, external relaxation. It's a reflection, a projection, a trajection. What's out is in, what's as within, so without, as without, so within. Both are a reflection of each other. And this is a effect of self-reflection. How I am on the outside is definitely how I am on the inside. They both reflect each other. This is when that self-reflection is evident in one. When you see that, feel that, sense that in an individual, especially people who knew me in my past, they wouldn't even recognize me now. As a matter of fact, I walked past them on purpose just to see if they said what up, the same thing to me. They looked at me and just kept walking. I did that to test, just to see where my vibration was at. And also showed as well, it revealed where their vibration was. We meet these people in just kind of conscious states of existence, but if no longer in that conscious state, in that specific vibration, they become invisible to your now reality and vice versa. I always bring up the example pH balanced water. All these pH balanced waters, 7.5, 8.3, 9.1. pH balance is potential hydrogen, potential fluidity, which is a vibration, a frequency. Illness, ailments, imbalances within the body, they exist with 6.2 to 6.5 on the vibration scale and the frequency scale. If you are eating water, you either drinking liquid or you're eating water, two different things. But if you are eating water at a pH balance of 7.2 to 9.1, your body is in a different vibrational orbit. That's why you begin to think different. You begin to do different, be different, or be something different than you were before. Not different to people or different to your reality, but different to yourself. You become indifferent to yourself. Like when I look in the mirror now, I don't even know who the hell that is anymore. Even my present state, I don't recognize this person I see in the mirror because I'm going through constant transformations, which grows and sprouts from self-awareness, self-realization, and self-reflection. These are the divine graduatory states, which is what I teach, what I share with my teens and other teachers in my classes and courses. Those of you who may find interest, once again, the information is on the bottom of this video, as much as all over on all my videos. All this information to my classes and courses are underneath all my videos. My email is there as well to get back in touch with me if you find any interest. If this catches your attention and holds your interest and you have a natural affinity to this specific flame, to this specific light, run towards it. Just as I ran towards it, which is how I received it, which is why I'm able to share it. I've been on the path of knowing knowledge of self, and then knowledge of myself, and then knowledge of the self, knowledge for 17 to 19 years. So this is nothing new to me. And I've walked and traveled with the greatest in this experience, in this reality. A lot that even y'all know, but don't know I came across that wave. I came with that wave. And I was telling somebody the other day, I'm in some of the crowds and the audience of some of the most highest masters and elders that taught what I'm saying, I'm sharing. I come from the days of attending lectures with giants, spiritual giants, gurus, yogis, masters, teachers, elders, monsters. That's the cloth I'm cut from. That's the blade I was cut from. And I am that. So, like I said before, you want to have a knowledge of self. It's okay. You want that. You want to begin coloring in your coloring book. But it doesn't hurt to find out where that coloring book was made. Who was the publisher of that company that distributed that coloring book? And that's when you begin to go into the mind. Before the colors, before the blank pages, the blank characters, the outlines, the silhouettes of things, the pages, the cover, front cover, back cover. Before any of it was created, where the hell did it come from? And you can even look at the coloring into the character that was in the coloring book as the identities, the ego, the personalities. Every color, every crayon you use, every mark, every color pencil is coloring in the ego, personality, and identity. So why don't you pay attention sometimes? Pay attention to the one who's holding the paintbrush or the crayon or the marker or the color pencil. And also question, where did that book come from? And that alone will pull you right back into self-awareness to become self-realized in order to activate the self-reflection, to begin reflecting outwardly what you are projecting inwardly. And that's today's live. Appreciate y'all coming and arriving. And I will see y'all next time. To my A.A.A.Y.A trainees, my A.A.A.Y.A teachers as well. I'll see y'all in class. And the acknowledgement is appreciated, as you all.